Most leaders treat relationships as a soft skill, but a 2026 Forbes Human Resources Council article calls relational capital a vital strategic resource, noting that leaders who deliberately cultivate broad, trust based networks see better cross functional collaboration, faster decision cycles, and more resilient teams. Today, we get into why relationship capital is a real asset, why most B2B leaders underinvest in it, and what it takes to build a network that compounds the way money does. Welcome to Some Goodness, where we engage seasoned business leaders and experts to share practical guidance and tips to help new and future leaders maximize their impact. My guest today is Eddy Arriola. Eddy founded Apollo Bank in Miami in 2009, served as its chairman and CEO until its acquisition by Seacoast Bank in 2022, and now sits on Seacoast's board of directors. He's also a CEO and board advisor to companies across the U.S., a former presidential appointee to the Inter-American Foundation, and the author of It's All About Relationships, Mastering the Art of Relational Leadership. Well, Eddy, welcome.
Awesome, Richard. Thank you.
I'm looking forward to diving in with you. You recently published a book on relationships.
Yeah.
I think, that's one area that we could all benefit from. And so excited to get some insights from you today.
Yeah. Well, I did write a book about relationships, but I want to stress this isn't like marriage counsel or that sort of, this is relationships in the professional environment and,
Yes.
how you grow your business and lead through relationships. So, but
Although
some of
I
the
was
things do
hoping that some of
translate
the-
it into personal stuff, but
Yeah.
this is not a marriage advice podcast today.
Right. But I was going to say that I was looking at some of your framework and I'm like, hey, I could apply that with my wife.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all
But
people.
let's kind of start at the high level. When we were talking earlier, you said that when you look back at your career, the really good things that happened through other people, and some of the misses happened when the relationship wasn't quite there. When was it that it kind of dawned on you that relationships are just so key in business, and maybe as your book states, it's an asset that many leaders underuse.
Yeah. Well, the title of the book is It's All About Relationships. And that's resonated with people because so many of us have used that a zillion times. You've heard that expression over and over and over. And so, I always had that idea, but I'd started a business, Apollo Bank, had an exit in October of 2022. And although I stayed on as sort of an executive, I really had a lot more time. I didn't have that much responsibility. And I just had a point of reflection of like, how did I get here? What do I want to do next? And what are some of my personal assets? And I was pretty honest with myself, where I got to a point where I was pretty honest, whereas, hey, I had these points of success, not because I had the smartest idea or not because I had this black box in my garage that I pull out and release some magic. I really got things done through people. And when I started to reflect even on the things that didn't go right in my life, and especially professionally, but personally as well, it was because I didn't have the right relationships. I didn't have someone to help me, someone to fall back on, and it just kept coming up over and over and over. And as I started to have more time, and I'm on the board of several companies, some publicly traded, some privately traded, and I do CEO board advisory. Those are the issues that kept coming up. It wasn't strategy, it wasn't finance, it was people and relationships and successes and failures and frustrations revolved around relationships with other people. So that was kind of like the dawning moment. And I wanted to take a deep dive into the topic.
And once you became aware of that, did you find yourself being a little bit more intentional in terms of looking for those right relationships, developing those right relationships?
Yeah. I mean, so I've always had a framework, and looking back, I've always had a framework, and I realized it kind of was my superpower without it being really conscious. And I'm like, oh, wait, I'm talking to Richard, and Richard's having this roadblock. Why isn't he doing this thing and that thing? And then I tell you, and you're like, oh, I didn't know to do that, or I've never done that. I've never had success doing that. And I realized, somewhere over the course of time, I've just had success using these tools that I either learned or that I've developed. And I wanted to find a way to teach these tools and sort of articulate them. But it was, I'd look back and be like, this little tactic or this strategy was super helpful in helping me achieve what I wanted to achieve.
Right. We'll often talk about the unconscious competence,
Yeah, that's a
right?
great point.
You just kind of knew almost intuitively, how to do things, and you framed these things in a certain way. And of course, now it's manifested this great framework, which I do want to get in and touch on here in a minute. But let's start a little bit before that in terms of the difference between relationships versus like just being charming versus networking, because I think a lot of that gets confused, especially in a sales context. Hey, you got
That's
to be
right.
a good relationship guy. You got to,
Yeah.
build trust and build relationship. But I
Yeah.
think you draw some unique lines between, being charming versus developing relationships.
Yeah, right. As salespeople and sales organizations, we get kind of lazy by saying, "Oh, that's a relationship guy." Actually, now that I say that out loud, it's usually the people that really don't understand sales and marketing. That's like, "Oh, that's the relationship guy,"
Okay.
and they're saying because it's he's charming or he's good with people. People that are really good at relationships just so happen are really good with people,
Mm,
but doesn't necessarily mean that they're good with all people. And when you think about, oh, the sales guy, like, oh, that's the guy that walks into a restaurant and says hi to everybody, or he's really charming. That doesn't necessarily mean that's the most successful business development or salesperson. It's usually the one that has a deep understanding of the customer, the people they're interacting with, and can go sort of across lines of either across departments. They'll go into a presentation and understand how to talk to an IT person, as well as a sourcing person, as well as sort of the end user. And they're
mm,
able to really connect and understand where that person is coming from. What's the important issue with that individual? Is it price? Is it sort of the long-term relationship and sort of taking a long-term view? Is it that they're worried about, hey, I just don't want to get fired and I have fear? So I really found it was that the individuals that are really good at relationships just understand other people and they go out of their way to be like, I'm just going to take a minute and I'm going to try to figure out what's going on with this other human being. And then I'm going to
right.
speak to that as opposed to being like, hey, great shirt, nice hat, and we mistake that. And that's where we get lost.
Do you also find that it's also the ability to kind of tailor your approach to meet the other person where they are? I mean, everybody's kind of, some are more process oriented, some are more blue sky visionary thinking, and just kind
Y-
of really recognizing, where they're coming from, and meeting them where they are in terms of that
Oh,
relationship.
oh, you nailed it. I believe it's the people that, again, and I use an expression, sort of take a beat, just take a minute and be like, what's going on with this person? You go to
Yeah.
the American Airlines counter and you want that upgrade. Charming usually doesn't work, but it's like, all right, everybody's yelling at this woman. Can I just sort of be like, hey, I know everybody's yelling at you. I'm just coming to you with another request, but do you mind just looking at I just want to see where I
Right.
am because, and just
Sure.
try to put yourself in that person's shoes. And other times it is, you walk up, hey, great shirt, go Dodgers. And the guy's like, hey, yeah, come on in. You can skip the line. And it's really sort of assessing the situation and realizing we're all human, but we're all different. And there's different types of humans and we're going through different things in our life. And again, being able to understand what's going on with that person at that particular time and what their pressures or incentives are.
Got it. I think that's a good lead in to your framework because you've kind of
Yeah.
built out, I think it's five steps in the framework.
Yeah.
Let's start at the high level of what that framework is and those
Yeah.
five. Maybe we can touch on a couple
Well,
components.
as we were talking about, as I had this moment of reflection of where have I had success and realizing, oh, wait, not everyone has it. There's, again, this misperception of, oh, he's good with people. It's because he's charming or funny. And that's not what it is. And I started like, how do I articulate, how do I teach this to someone else? And so I started to really think about all the different sort of tools I've used and what's really important. And so I sort of coined this term. It's called CARPE, CARPE. Each of those letters stands for something, which I'll touch on briefly. But the idea, as you know, Carpe Diem, seize the day. And I'm like, seize a relationship. Like
Mm,
this is what business growth is about, business sales, business development. It's you have to seize the relationship. Very few companies that I've come across, and I even struggle. It's because they have like the best product. Things are so competitive. It's like everybody has a really, 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 really. All your competitors have really, really, really good products, and maybe there's a subtle difference in your product, but it's got to be a bunch of these other little value add. It's because you have a great, back office that delivers. So, but it's really about a relationship that you build around. So I wanted to have a framework that I can teach this to people in sort of steps, and also realizing you're not always at there's sometimes you're at day one of a relationship, Other times you're at
Right.
year 5 and there's a change, and you have to have sort of this cycle to realize, where you are and where to spend your time and effort and energy.
That's great. If you know me, I love process, right?
Yeah.
And I love checklists and I love frameworks, just because I think it provides just kind of tactical guidance on how to implement a new idea, learn a new skill, right?
Yeah, you actually nailed it because I was working with one CEO who's a tech CEO, PhD, brilliant technology guy, not very good with people, and he was struggling with his board of directors, with his management team. He would get sales. He's like, "Well, I'm the best sales guy in my company because I go into the meeting." And I always close it. I'm like, yeah, you close it because you have all the authority, and you can you can give the pricing concessions and that sort of thing. And you are brilliant. I mean, you do understand the technology issues and the customer issues, and he's like, "I can't do what you do," talking to me. He goes, "Because it comes easy to you. Like, it's natural for you." And that's when it dawned on me. I'm like, well, it may be easier for me, but it's not easy. I have a process. Let me walk you
Right.
through the process. When I sit with someone, I'm super deliberate. And that's a lot of this is, being deliberate. And so like not to go into all of it, I'll hit on two different components. First one, I say is to connect. And I'm
Mhm.
sure you've been in a room, with a boardroom, and there's a bunch of people, and people will be like, "Hey, Richard, you're in Dallas. Oh, go Cowboys!" And the guy will just keep talking about the Cowboys and realize, wait, there's 5 other people in the room that didn't watch the game, don't care. They happen to live in Dallas, but they're actually Packers or Steelers fans or whatever, and they miss out on that connection. They're not really reading the room, and it's what's the point where we can really connect and that you have a unique perspective. And that's a whole process. I have a series of tools in there where you really find that point of, oh, you and I have this thing that we can talk about, and I really understand where you're coming from. I'm just not viewing you as some dude from Dallas that I assume likes the Cowboys. And then the other key part is, bumping along the CARPE, the CARPE letters. I really believe like a prioritization. So the P stands for prioritization. Is
Yes.
you can't do it all. We all have a zillion people in our lives. And if you're in business development and sales, there's so many people that you have to, work through. Is really prioritizing. And that means how you manage your calendar, who you reach out to. What I found, a lot of the prioritization issues were not around, oh, I don't have time in my calendar. It's, I don't want to have the tough conversation. I'm
Right.
scared of rejection. It's easier for me to call my buddy Jim and invite him to lunch and talk about the upcoming deal, as opposed to talk to the person who doesn't have a decision making authority in this process, but is a big influencer. And
Right.
she doesn't like to go to lunch, and I got to sit with her in her cube while her back is to me. She's on my computer, but I have to really understand where she's coming from. So I found a lot that people were avoiding their priorities because it was just harder.
Right.
So again, in teaching that, and again, to go back to your point, I believe all sales is a process. One step logically follows another, and I think relationship building is very similar.
For sure, for sure. Well, and you hit on the P because as I was reading through that and thinking about prioritization, a couple of things came to mind. One was you have to be intentional about it, right?
That's right. That's
You
right.
just can't be ad hoc, and because you will go to your comfort zone. You will
Yeah,
go to the easier conversations or the more fun relationships, and you be
that's right.
missing out on others. And then the other aspect that hit me that I could probably do a better job in is thinking inwardly, what
Yes.
relationships are going to develop you as well. And I think we talked early on in our podcasts on an episode with Al Montserrat about mentors and
Yes.
being mentees, et cetera, and prioritizing time for your mentor and for you to be developed so that you can then benefit others and have more to offer others. So there's kind of a two-way street of
That's right.
prioritization.
Yeah, mentor. I mean, I listened to Al's podcast, and I love that part about mentors. And one of the things, and I'm sure you've come across, there are formal mentors in life. A boss, a teacher, maybe an aunt or an uncle. But I have mentors in my life that if I told them that they were a mentor to me, they'd be surprised. And I'll tell you, one of the blurbs on the back of the book, sort of recommending the book and me was, there is a guy by the name of Coach Jim Larinaga, who's a head basketball coach at the University of Miami, and George Mason, and took 2 teams to the NCAAs. And I've known him for about 10 years, and we like each other, and we've spent time together. And when I reached out to him and I'm like, hey, I'd like for you to read this book, and you're comfortable with it, I'd like for you to give a review and a blurb. I was anxious to ask him. And he was like, just so
Right.
honored. And he was like, why? Why me? Like, you can get a bunch of people. And I'm like, "You're like a mentor to me." And he's like, "But I can't believe, like, I never coached you. I go, but every time we have a conversation, I walk away with a series of notes." And he's actually a huge reader. And I'm like, this book influenced me and that book influenced me. And he would refer some of his, as you know, every college sports team, there's the superstars, but there's always like 4 or 5 walk-ons at the end of the team that they're just there as a practice dummy, like bodies
Right.
to like,
Sure.
to get banged up. And he would always send those kids to me to interview him. He's like, "Hey, these guys, they're not going to make it to the NBA. They're not going to, not going to play basketball in Europe. Can you help them so they can get jobs in the real world and that sort of thing?" And I'm like, and that made me better. And so without you, us formally sitting down, and I'm not one of your players, but in my mind, you've been a mentor to me. And so I encourage people, it doesn't have to be a formal thing. It could be one off, but that when you get that opportunity, you're just taking those gold nuggets and living up to the best version of you. So that
Yeah.
you honor that person.
That's great. Well,
Yeah.
and then that gives you an opportunity to kind of think about those that you would consider a mentor to yourself. How and where do they provide value? And
Yeah.
then flip it around and say, am I providing that kind of value to others? Right. And so kind of
Yeah.
give you a little bit of a self assessment or a litmus test, or just give you a guidepost in terms
Yeah.
of how can you be a better mentor and leader to others?
Well, so I'll tell you one of the things that talk to, well, I was going to say young people, but really anybody. And they're like, I don't provide any value to that guy. What am I giving to him? And I said, the best thing you can do is be a good listener and a good student and follow up because, there's been a lot of guys, I've had dozens of people that call me and be like, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting a bank. Can we sit for lunch?" I'm like, "Of course, I'd love to do that." And they sit and they do all the talking. And when I'm like, "Oh, wait, I have an idea," and they shoot my idea down or they don't follow up and they just talk. So I'm like, what actually would have been helpful to me, what was just to talk about the process. And because then I have a reflective moment to be like, "Oh, when I started, this worked for me and that didn't work for me." And there's actually value in just being a good student and then following up saying, "Thank you for this. It really helped me. This is how I implemented." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's good feedback." In that when I teach people, this subject, it resonates and I can use that going forward. So you don't necessarily have to be like, you know, "I'm asking you for advice and I need to give you a lead or a bottle of champagne or get you into a great restaurant," or whatever you think the value is. A lot of times just being a really good student and honoring that person.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I wanted to take advantage of some of your experience and insights from the banking world. So,
Yeah.
my firm predominantly focuses on B2B, but
Yep.
in banking, yes, you have the B2B component, but you also have strong, B2C. And we think about your community banks, et cetera, and developing relationships with your banker
Yep.
and vice versa. So what are some takeaways just over the years and with your experience that it might be some relationship muscle that's underdeveloped in the B2B world that we can
Yeah.
kind of learn from in the banking world?
Yeah. So the last, whatever, 20 years have been in this banking world and specifically community banking where even if you're calling on a company, it really is a one-on-one relation. You're dealing with a business owner or the CEO, and you're dealing with the shot caller most of the time. And I love that. But my background is really in a business where I was calling on Fortune 500 companies and dealing with, 12 people in a room, which is really, really hard, where you're like the marketing manager and the IT person, the sourcing person. So that's really my training. And that's where sort of like, I cut my teeth and those skills really helped me coming over to the one-on-one world and realizing how you connect with other people in a room. Because what I found with bankers is that they may be really good with one-on-one, but they're not good at really understanding, all the different needs. And when the owner of a company brought in their CFO or they brought in their business partner or what have you, they didn't know how to sort of manage this multi-person sort of sales process. But as it relates to banking and sort of the general sales, like is really connecting with someone one-on-one and sort of customizing I'll call it your pitch, but I don't. I don't guess really like that word, but sort of perfecting that conversation of, again, this is a unique human being. What's going on with this person? What are the issues? And as it relates to banking, a lot of the issues are usually around, guarantees, terms, what I found a lot of times when we're dealing with loans, you may be dealing with the shot caller, but they have other influences. And I talk about this in my book where like everyone has a boss, even, a business owner, because they're like, I've got to go home to my spouse and tell them, "Oh, by the way, I'm expanding the business, but I'm going to personally guarantee on this loan. And that's an issue for our relationship at home. Or I'd see over and over, we talk to people and they own the business and run the business. And we get to, some of the, working out the terms. And they're like, oh, but I didn't mention, but I have a 10% partner. Well, who's that 10% partner? Oh, it's Sally. And she moved to Arkansas. And like, well, we need her consent before we sign these loan documents. Like, you're encumbering the business and she has a, and like, well, I haven't talked to Sally in 10 years. And so like,
Right.
well, you better talk to Sally. And this is how we're going to cope. And so really understanding, again, where this person is coming from, where are their issues? And I'd see that over and over, especially with partnership issues in small businesses. So
Yeah.
dig a little deeper, just scratch,
Yeah.
keep digging a little deeper and you're going to get the right information.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I wanted to think about ways, and we're kind of near the end of our episode here, to just, give some practical advice. Some of our listeners out there think of it as a CEO, CRO listening in that they might be able to apply, this next quarter, for example. And one of the things I was thinking about your framework, I know
Yeah.
it's kind of a cycle and a loop,
Yeah.
and the E is for evaluate and evaluating. I thought that might be kind of a nice way for people to think about starting to see where they are, as a leader, and just say, hey, evaluate your relationships or the status. What do you think about that idea in terms of a practical takeaway?
Yeah,
And
I
what
I
would you
love
add?
that. It just so happens that it's carpet because it spells out a really cool word that you can, seize a relationship, seize the day. But it is, you can almost start anywhere, and different relationships, you start at different points. But I do encourage people to evaluate. And one of the questions I ask is, what relationships aren't serving you right now? What are just taking up
Mm,
too much of your time? And what I found a lot was one of the barriers to people is loyalty. So like Jack's my first client. He's the guy that got me here. He was the one that, because I got that deal, I got promoted and that sort of thing. But when you go to the conference and you're always hanging out with Jack and Jack's no longer the decision maker, is it keeping you from other people? Are there other ways, to do that? Or Jack, maybe he may have been your most important client, but he's retiring in 2 years. You don't want your client to retire you. Where they say, well, that was Jack's guy, we're bringing in. And that definitely happened to me, especially in my old company where we had long-standing relationships, and then there would be a management change, and
mhm.
we'd just be pushed out because you were with the other guy, and yeah, you had great relationship, and they had a picture of you vacationing together on their
Right.
desk. But we packed up that photo, and it's in a box, and it's being shipped out the door, and you're going with it. And so it's
Right.
really evaluate of where you want to go, who are the decision makers today, and who are the decision makers tomorrow. And just really, you really want to be reflective, and not just be busy, busy, busy.
Yeah. Well, that's given me kind of, because I thought about it when I was reading through your book.
Yeah,
Haven't put it into practice, but just
yeah,
you kind of emphasizing, you don't want to be, Jack's guy or single
yeah.
threaded in an
That's
account
right.
and things like that. And so that gives me renewed motivation to go back and do that evaluation step across our
Yeah,
relationships.
that's great.
And then that can lead to then prioritization of,
That's
your
right.
time and all that good stuff, right?
Yeah.
Well, really good. Love it. I think, as we kind of talked about developing healthy relationships and just the provocative idea that, it's a super asset that in many cases is underutilized is a great way to think about it. I think there's a
Yeah.
real opportunity for us as leaders to dig in and take it to the next level. So excited for everybody else to enjoy your book as well.
Thank you.
As we wrap up today, the title of our podcast is Some Goodness, because we love to just
Yeah.
share goodness. So outside of your book and your career, what's some goodness that you've experienced lately you would like to share with us?
I'll say it actually is related to the book because that's been sort of, even though it was just published and I worked on it for a year or two before, it's really been sort of in the works. I'll say arguably all my life. The best thing that's happened to me was being able to launch a book, and in the back there's acknowledgments, and almost in every book there's always acknowledgments. In my book I put some of my teachers throughout my life, from my
Ah,
sixth grade teacher to the old principal at my high school, and just there's like 5 or 6 different teachers that were in the book, and they were there, and they wouldn't have known that I wrote this book. And the day it was published, I either called them if I had their number or sent them a text, and I'm like, I wrote this book. It came out today. You're in the acknowledgments. I either want to deliver a hand copy to you or mail it if they weren't around. And every single person freaked out. And I'm like, teachers matter. Books exist and success exists because someone else helped get you here, especially when you're young and you didn't know.
right.
And so reaching out to someone with The greatest reward was I reached out to my 6th grade teacher, and I somehow came up with her phone number. Couldn't even find her email. And I sent her a text and I go, "Is this Mary Albanese? This is Eddy Arriola. I was in your class in 6th and 7th grade. I just wrote a book," and I took a picture of it. "And I list you in the acknowledgments. If it's okay, I would like to send you a copy." And she goes, "If this is the Eddy Arriola that I remember, this is the Mary Albanese that taught you, I'd be honored." And because we were texting, I couldn't see her smile, but I knew it was there, and it was such a warm feeling. And I was the only person in the world. I was home alone, and it was such a warm feeling. So that was, I think a takeaway if someone's listening is, you are where you are because someone else helped pave the way. Go back into the Wayback Machine and just reach out. Hey, man, I was thinking of you today. I did this. You will light someone up, and I'm telling you, you're going to get something. You're going to feel great because you're going to know that you made that person's day, and that's magic.
That's wonderful, and I'm sure every one of them were just super honored, and you just made their day when they got that text or that phone call.
Yeah. So, it felt so. And a couple of people, I hand gave it to them, and they just, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I can't believe. And it was just their one little name in the back of a book.
Yeah.
And they were so touched.
So cool. So good. Well, thank you so much for being here.
It's fantastic.
Always a pleasure chatting with you, and I look forward to us recording another episode soon.
Looking forward to it.
Some Goodness is a creation of Revenue Innovations. Visit us at revenueinnovations.com and subscribe to our newsletter.